We are in week 2 of a series called God's Questions. And it really, I said last week, it's like a spinoff. So we were in a series called Stories, which I love. I love stories. The best stories are the stories from this book right here. And I come from a culture of storytellers, so I enjoy a good story. I told bedtime stories last night, and they weren't like any you had heard before. Had the grandkids, man, I was telling stories. Their eyes were big. But the best stories are in the Bible. But this is a spinoff of that series because it is still stories. We will stay specifically on one passage, but presently we're addressing questions that God asks in the Bible. And when you think about the power of a good question, so I want to say this so that we can think about the context of the question today in this way. But you think of Socrates, who lived 400 years before the birth of Christ. He developed what was known in teaching as the Socratic method. And the idea was that instead of everything being a download, he would ask his students questions that would cause them to think. And the truth was that when we have to answer a question ourselves, the truth becomes more deeply entrenched in our thinking, right? So we use it as parents too, right? I said that last week, like we'll say, so how did that choice work out for you? What might you do different next time? You know, those are real questions you ask your kids. And so I think so Socrates didn't actually develop the Socratic method, God did. Because he started asking questions in the book of Genesis, everybody. And I love the book of Genesis for a lot of reasons. I'm very much into creation, the creation story, and science is kind of my thing, and history, so you can understand I would love Genesis. But also, I just like that it's named Genesis. I just think that's so smart, because it's the first book, everybody. Genesis. Okay, chuckle a little. I mean, that's, not much. Okay, it's fine. And our question today comes from the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 3 and verse 9. It's God's first question in the Bible, and it just simply... there I am. Man, I was just going to keep preaching. I mean, if those lights didn't come on, don't you worry about it a little bit. I just don't want to mess up this screen, you know what I'm saying? Now I'm going to keep going, y'all. But everything was going great until it wasn't, right? No. If you look at Genesis chapter 4, so Genesis chapter 1 and 2, man, creation, perfection, it's incredible. Genesis chapter 4, jealousy, envy, murder. What happened? What happened? Well, those of you following along chronologically would know Genesis chapter 3. That's what happened. What happened from this perfection in creation and paradise in the garden was Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God actually say, you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? So even before God's question, the enemy was applying this Socratic method. He was using a question to create deception. He's pretty good at that. And notice, though, that even the question that he asked, he actually changed God's directive. The question was flawed in the way that he asked it because he misrepresented what God had said. Again, I'll say he said, did God actually say, you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? And the answer to that question is no, that's not what he said. If we back up to Genesis chapter 2, verses 15 through 18, he was talking to Adam. Eve wasn't even created yet, so I think a little bit more of the responsibility for the fall has to fall on Adam. And then God said to Adam, look, you can eat from any tree, actually, in the garden, except this one that's in the middle, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat from it, you'll die. And this wasn't even just God trying to be controlling. I really believe that God just knew and understood the consequence, and he had given free will, which, seems like a questionable choice, but I'll say for certain we have no right to question the God of creation who lives outside of time and space. Just want to say that out loud. But in the way that we reason, man, this didn't feel like it was ever going to go well. And that's mostly me knowing me, right? But he gave them free will, but instruction to protect. right? It wasn't that God was on a power trip. God was giving instruction to protect. And the devil distorted it. He said, did God really say that you can't eat of any fruit or tree? He still does this. He's always trying to undermine God's authority. A first takeaway for us, which is just a synoptic of what I've said so far, is this: the devil loves to put a question mark where God has put a period. This is what he does. Like, it's one of his key strategies. He's like to put a question mark. Man, some of us in this house this morning, we need to get our pencil with eraser out, and we need to look in our lives, and we need to erase some question marks and reestablish the period. Because we know what God has said. First of all, I'll say that if he said it here, that's good enough, right? We ain't messing with or monkeying with this word, right? This is God's amazing, gracious instruction to us to protect us and to save us. And the devil likes, he is punking the church right now with putting question marks in the very well punctuated word of God. You know what I'm saying? And he's doing that. And I don't know where you land on this, but I'm pretty sure it'll be the same place I land on this. But I know as a parent or a person who works and walks in certain places of authority, I don't like it when someone undermines that authority. And I'm just a human. But with our kids, Karen and I there were certain things that we established as parameters and perspectives and culture we were building as a family. I know Jacob and Christy would even say to Judah and Grace, they would say, well, this is how our family does that. And we try to make those choices and decisions based on the book, but even other Christ followers sometimes might have a slightly different perspective. But this is how we do it, right? And so if our kids went to someone else's house or were in some other space and they came back and said, yeah, they were saying, did your parents really say? Or you mean they don't let you? Mom, I'm going to tell you right now, they didn't go to that house anymore. You understand what I'm saying? Like, okay, that's fine. God love you. You make your choices, but don't try to make mine. You know what I'm saying? And the devil made his, by the way. He's upset, everybody. He was an archangel. He was in a prominent position, got too big for his proverbial britches, and decided he would try to be God, right? Instead of believe God, and he got the boot, and now he's upset about it. And he wants to destroy God's prized creation and relationship, which is with us. Don't listen to him. That's the point I'm trying to make. And then verse 2 says, the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. So she's correcting him. But God said, you shall not eat of the tree in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it lest you die. So again, on its face, that seems like a good response. I'm going to draw our attention to a couple of issues here, though. First of all, in chapter 2, we don't find anywhere where he said, do not touch it. But I'm not messed up about that addition. Maybe that was Adam. Adam, when he said, yeah, before you were created, God said, don't eat from that tree. I think we just shouldn't touch it. I'm not going to disown the dude for that. That seemed like a good idea. I'm a fan of staying away from the things God wants me to stay away from. You know what I'm saying? Anywhere I can eliminate a temptation, I'm for it. I just throw that in there for free, so I ain't dissing on Eve for that. But the real issue here is that she entertained a conversation with the devil. That's a problem. I don't believe, a serpent had ever spoken before, so I understand that would sort of garner your attention, but you should move on. And now he's trying to talk about God, right? Like he has some authority. She entertained the conversation. I would just say to all of us, be careful who you talk to. And I didn't just say who you listen to. Like there's a conversation happening here. Man, I don't know. Maybe those monkeys had it right? Maybe they knew what they were talking about. Like see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I might have gotten that out of order. I don't remember. It's not the worst advice ever. Now I understand we can't hide. I get that. But we could protect. We could guard. Like we're not meant to hide in this world or pretend things aren't what they are, but we are called to guard our hearts. Listen, we are called to be in the world, but not of it. All right? And we a whole lot of it and not near enough in it. You understand? She entertained the conversation. She should have shut him down. And there are some, if we're honest, there are some voices in our lives today, we just need to shut them down. And we get them from a lot of places. Listen, the enemy is still in the propaganda business. Don't you doubt it. What we watch, man, our screens, he uses our screens against us. He's trying to create question marks again where God has put a period. Another takeaway for us is this: making wrong choices starts with listening to wrong voices. And that's the first thing that happened here in the fall, the original fall. You're listening to the wrong voice. Well, but I have questions. Okay, and that's cool. I do too. Lots of questions. But you just got to know where to ask them. James said in James 1:6, if any of you lack wisdom, which is all of us, by the way, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all men without holding back. But let him ask in faith without wavering between opinions. Because the one that wavers is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed. Who you listening to? Who you listening to? And then verse 4. So at first he just uses a little question, a little accusation, a minor distortion. Did God really say? Then he goes straight lie. In verse 4 he says, you won't die. The serpent replied to the woman, God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing good, both good and evil. They were already like God. The word told us already at creation, they were created in the image of God, in the likeness. Literally, the word is the likeness of God. They were already like God, but they didn't have the capacity for the knowledge of good and evil without it messing up their destiny to live and caused them to experience death. And when I see this, man, I see straight up light. You won't die. So he went quick too. Come on, how many of us can relate to that? Like for a second, it was just a minor conversation and deception. And then the next thing you know, we're doing something we never thought we would do, believing something we never thought we would believe. We were being lied to. I feel like this in this story is a perfectly appropriate place to say, liar, liar, pants on fire. That's going to happen, everybody. The devil's pants are going to definitely... Better get you some asbestos pants, because this is, you know what Jesus said about the devil? John 8:44. He said, first of all, he's always been a murderer and a liar. He said that, in fact, lying is in his character and the truth is not in him. And then he made this declaration about the devil. He's the father of lies. Again, I'm going to say, who you listening to? Like, who has a voice? And the devil lies. And then this is the saddest part of this entire chapter 3. It says this: the woman was convinced. Come on, and sometimes, I mean, we know folk, we are folk that we could put our names, we could insert our names in that place right there, that we were convinced. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to speak that over yourselves. But we've been convinced. Man, there's a lot of folk in the world today, I love them, by the way, but that just have been convinced of something that's completely not true and even damning. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious. They call that lust. And the lust of life, man. And she wanted the wisdom it would give her, which was a lie. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. Then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. Now, when you consider this, I think, like when I was coming up, I know this won't hit for everyone. I'm gonna throw the old people a bone. But when I was coming up in Sunday school, they had a flannel board, right? And you told these stories with these little pictographs, and Adam was always somewhere else in the garden, and this was all Eve. But Adam does not get a pass in the adult reading of this word. He was right there with her. I think he heard the whole thing. He should have stepped up. Come on, we need some friends in our life that will say, let me go over here and get rid of this snake right quick. You know what I'm saying? Two are not better than one when both are being deceived. Just saying. Just because you can get somebody to agree with you don't mean you're right. What happened in this passage first was lust. I said that already, but lust was the first thing that happened. She looked at something she didn't even need to be looking at. She didn't need to be looking at it. How many lives have been wrecked because we were looking at something we didn't need to be looking at? We were thinking about something that wasn't meant for us. Marriages have been wrecked. Homes have been broken. Destinies have been destroyed because we lived in a place of comparison. We thought, man, that would be better for me. And God had this will for you. And that's not how the hearts of God in this kingdom are meant to work. We're on a journey with Jesus, and it's better than you can dream or imagine. And it won't look like everybody else's. It's your journey. Go on it and trust God with it. Follow him faithfully. But she was lusting after something, and then she chose rebellion. I mean, God was very specific in the word that he gave. Well, God said, don't eat it, but I'm going to eat it anyway, because the serpent said it would be good. Man, and we can't hate on her. We get our advice from even less reputable sources. And then, ultimately, it was a matter of betrayal, because God loved them and walked with them in the garden and was their friend, and had actually given them authority and dominion over the animals. Not the other way around. It was certainly betrayal. For me, I feel like if they had had just a bit more fear. Say, well, fear is not of God. Perfect love casts all fear. In this context, we think of fear. We think of respect. But I tell you, it's a little bit like fear. I'm just saying, it's a godly version, because I had some from my mom. You understand what I'm saying? I don't know where you were, but I told you last week, if you were here, man, my mom's name was Mary. And yeah, she was pretty good at keeping us straight. And there was accountability. Plus, I'm the last of 5 kids. So my brother and sister, I love y'all, they kind of put me in a more microscopic space in terms of accountability, because they blew it. So I wasn't getting away with nothing. And my mom was on it. And I am glad. I am glad. I avoided some of the pitfalls that they didn't, because my mom caught a clue and said, no, you say you're going to be there. I'm going to find out if you're going to be there. And she was in my business. And I am thankful. And I had some godly fear of the repercussions if I didn't do what my mom said. And there was a time when I didn't. And I was pretty small when this story I'm about to share with you happened. But I was actually, we lived in a really small house. And for the first time ever, the house was completely finished. When we first moved in the early 60s, 900 square feet, Jim Walter spec-built home. So it literally came in a crate, I'm sure. And I think I said they bought it for $7,500, but it was unfinished. And there was this one room that by the time, I think we were 2 when I moved in, but now I'm like 5, somewhere in that range. And finally got that last room finished. We were living in it already, but finally got it finished. Unpainted sheetrock. My mom got it all painted. Well, there was no decor, everybody. And so I felt like maybe I could help with that. I did have a fresh box of crayons. And my mom saw me in there. She was pretty intuitive, maybe prophetic. And she said, don't color on the wall. But man, that went in this one and out that one. You know what I'm saying? So when she was gone, man, I drew a clown. It was a good one too, y'all. I mean, like I remember. But I'm pretty confident. But I drew the clown, and then mom came in, and before, there was not a lot of reaction other than to snatch me up and whoop my butt. You know what I'm saying? Like there was no counting. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, wah! You know what I'm saying? That's how I grew up. Glad for it too, don't mishear me. But then, I didn't get in trouble much. And so I was like, oh man. And so I wrote her a note, which she kept. She had it in a box full of pictures, even after she went to be with Jesus. And it said, I go away, same crayons, I do bad. And then I went and took a hot bath. So I didn't really go anywhere, but just separated myself from my mom. She said she heard me in there splashing. She wasn't too worried about it. There's some folks in this house this morning, maybe missed the mark, made a bad choice. And God, though, is so God. The woman was convinced. Here's another takeaway for you. It was inspired by the aforementioned Miranda. But you shut down the deceiver by surrendering to the Savior. How do you do it? You surrender to God. You say, you're God. You're God. You know best. I trust you. I trust your voice. I believe what you have to say. I don't have to understand it all the time. I just believe in who you are. And then in that moment that they took the fruit, the word says, their eyes were opened and they suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. So they sewed fig leaves to cover up. And there was in that moment broken relationship. I mean, the great consequence of sin is broken relationship. And this is the point again where the human heart would question, man, God, I mean, this free will stuff, we're not good with it. And I remember in the day pondering that almost as a theological discourse. Like I had prayed, God, could I have a little less free will? Anybody? Like if you ever wanted to lose weight, you're like, hey, could we do a reduction of appetite? That would be awesome. Right? And sometimes you want to pray that for the rest of your life too. Like God, and the Lord is good at helping us to consecrate our will, but it's still our will. And we have to make choices to surrender it to Him. It doesn't go away. And I remember having this conversation back in the day when I was a young preacher in Louisiana, and I had a bit of a mentor named Brother Bartett. We called him Brother B. He was an amazing Cajun pastor and preacher. And he always would say, God didn't create automatons or robots. He wanted relationship, and you can't have that with a robot. You know, and I believe that. I believe the value that God puts on relationship with us is so significant that He couldn't create an automaton or a robot. So I wrote us a poem in that regard, and it goes like this. If I were a robot, I would make no mistakes. I'd have no emotions for the devil to play. My programming alone would always decide. I would feel no remorse. Have no need to hide. But if I were a robot, I couldn't relate. Everything pre-planned, nothing innate. A robot can't choose with its diodes and drives to love or be loved. It feels nothing inside. But people, though messy, can know and be known. We can relate to our Maker, feel the love that He's shown. And He's shown a lot of love. Everybody, my God, my friend, the sovereign of the universe who loves me without end. And lastly, robots become obsolete, but people never do. No matter the struggle or misstep, God has an update, redemption, just for you. I'm glad I'm not a robot. Come on. And at that moment, their eyes were open, verse 7, and they suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. That's when shame entered the story. The word nakedness here really just means shame. I like the way that the New Living translated that. So they sewed fig leaves together to cover. And I'm glad we moved on from fig leaves here. And certainly, though, sometimes in our own efforts to cover up our shame or our sin, we make lame efforts and attempts when God's got a redemptive solution for us, and His name is Jesus. But they were at that place where they felt that. And let me give you another takeaway. The devil turned a look into lust, lust into deception, and deception into a terrible decision. And that's often how it goes. So again, we're working live and on time here this morning. Where are you? Is there a place in your life where there's a lust that's happening and you know it's not God? Because that's not just dude and dudette. I'm talking about like God has called you to something and the enemy's trying to draw your heart to something else, right? Because lust leads to deception, causes us to think wrongly about what's real or what's true or what's God or what's good, and deception leads to terrible deciding. And you think about, there was a guy from a story from the 1300s. He was an emperor, and he had just a wardrobe that was beyond description. I mean, incredible clothes. Y'all are supposed to know where I'm going at this point. But these dudes came along, these Fingalis came along, and they said, hey, we're the greatest seamstresses in any kingdom, and we would like to make you, O great king, some new clothes. And they'll be the best ever. And the king, man, even though he had everything he needed, thought, wow, that would be amazing. I could use some more clothes. And they said, but our clothes are so spectacular that only the most elite can even actually see them. So most people won't be able to see them. They won't even think that they're there, but that's because they're dumb, right? So all those Dumb, inadequate people won't even be able to see the clothes. So they set up the equipment and they pretended they were making clothes. I'm still preaching, everybody. And then they gave him his new clothes, but there were no clothes. And so bruh is just walking amongst his kingdom naked, right? But he has told everyone, only the really brilliant will be able to see my new clothes. So nobody wanted to tell him, hey, we're too dumb to see your clothes, which is really rough. But come on, until he came upon a kid. You gotta love kids, man. Brutally honest. Hey, man, he's naked. I think that's what the Bible's talking about when it says you got to have the faith like a child. That's not exactly right. And that's us sometimes. Like we've believed it's something better and it's not. Here's another takeaway for you. Sin never gives you what it promises. Don't believe it. But look at what God did. When the cool of the evening breezes were blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord walking about in the garden. Isn't that amazing? It's just incredible to me that God still came. Even after this original sin, after this lust that led to rebellion and betrayal, he still came. Now that's, again, I'm preaching to us. Like that's our story. When we have a misstep, we make a mistake. Listen, here at 828 Church, we say run to God, not from God. They had hidden, like they had ran away from God and they are now hiding, but God came to them. The word says they hid from the Lord among the trees. Then the Lord called to the man, where are you? The Lord called to the man, where are you? Finally, we're at today's question again, where are you? Now God knew where he was, but he's asking, where are you? And I think the first reason for that is that God wasn't willing to lose him and God isn't willing to use you. The first reason he's asking our hearts that today, where are you? Is because God's not willing to lose you. Like he's not done with you. He hasn't forgotten about you. He hasn't given up on you. But what would it have been like? I mean, shouldn't it be the case that Adam would have been running to God? Again, think about the faith of a child and the way that a child will come. If a small one, for the most part, gets in trouble, like if you have to grump at them or blow their doors off, occasionally they might run the other way. They might pull a Ron and go take a hot bath, but they don't go far. But normally, if something happened that was traumatic like that for me, I would run to my mom. Like I wanted the comfort of knowing that she still loved me and she was still for me, even though I was in trouble. And that's kind of the way our little ones work in my life right now. Like they are the kids that if you start griping at them, they run to you. They'll wrap themselves around you because they understand they're in trouble, but they want to make sure that hasn't caused them to be unloved by you or distanced from you. And that's the approach that I pray that we will learn to take. But in this story, it was God that came to man, not man who ran to God. Charles Spurgeon said, the sinner comes not to God, but rather God comes to man. And that tells us something about God in this story this morning. And the question still stands, where are you? Where are you? Again, how did this choice work out for you? That's God's question to us. Where are you? God wants us to contemplate the answer to that question. He wants us to look at our circumstance and our situation, our life. He wants us to evaluate our own peace and joy. He's asking a question, where are you? Because you belong right here in a tight and right, redemptive, intimate relationship with me. Where are you this morning, church family? Choose him, right? Where are you as in your attitudes? Are they creating distance? Where are you? In your actions, your choices? Where are you in the way that you spend and allocate your time? Where are you? In terms of the voices that are speaking in your heart and your life right now, where are you? Where are you? Your decisions. Where are you in regards to your brokenness? Are you still carrying it when he came to heal? You still carrying a weight of guilt and shame? A sense of inadequacy? Where are you? Because God's here for all of that. Carissa's going to join me on the stage. I got another poem. Jacob told me, he said, Pops, if you don't stop writing so many poems, your whole message is going to be like slam poetry or something. I don't know. This is Adam speaking. He still came for our walk in the garden, even after the ridiculous things I'd done. But I shouldn't have been surprised. That's who he is. The deception I fell for was embarrassing, and the cost was quick to see. But his coming proves the point. I'm still his. Loads of regret for sure and certain. I can't go back, though I wish I could. But without the lesson learned, I'd still miss the mark. I did what I did of my own volition. Blaming my wife and the serpent was lame. Owning my actions, I know, is the place to start. This free will stuff is tricky unless you submit your will to his. As for me, going forward, that's what I'll do. He clothed us in grace and mercy, gave back hope where it once was lost. And I know whatever's ahead, he'll see us through. Don't let sin or sorrow determine your life ahead. Place it in his hands. He came looking to save and restore. You're still part of the Master's plan. I love that. He came. He did ask him a question for accountability. He said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree whose fruit I commanded you not to eat? I mean, this is him saying, how did that choice work out for you? He's asking us that too. Like, how did you get here? Where are you? And how did you get here? And it's not because he doesn't know or he's mad or angry. He wants us to see so we can choose differently next time. And then verses 12 through 19, they pass the buck a bit. That's where God comes to Adam. Adam said, she did it. Lame. Then she said, the devil made me do it. It's the first time that's ever thrown. She said, the serpent. Listen, nobody made you do it. Again, God's not mad at you. Passing the buck won't get you free. Whatever's been done to you in your history, I'm sorry for that. The heavy, the hurt, I'm sorry for that. But you still get to choose Jesus. That's how grace works. You still get to make godly choices that lead to wholeness and healing and destiny. And that's good news. The truth about sin is that it will take you farther than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, cost you more than you want to pay. That's an anonymous quote. A lot of people have been given credit for it over the years. I think it's a unanimous quote. Pardon the pun, because that applies to everybody. That's how sin works. Then look at God again. Come on, worship team. Then the man Adam named his wife Eve. So this is after God said, no more in the garden, paradise is lost, but I still love you. And then the man Adam named his wife Eve because she would be the mother of all who live. Like, God didn't replace her. He still had a plan for her. He still had a purpose for her. She's Eve. And then the Lord made clothing from animal skins for Adam and his wife. He still covered their nakedness. It cost the life of an animal. This was the precursor to Mosaic law with animal sacrifice, and it was moreover the precursor for the once and for all sacrifice that would one day be made for the remission of all our sins. And this Bible story of God's unfailing love for mankind is the whole story of the Bible. That's it right there. John Stott said it this way: the essence of sin is man submitting or substituting himself for God. The essence of salvation is God substituting himself for man. That's punchy, everybody. And that's what God did for us, James 2:13. Mercy triumphs over judgment. That's the good news in this house today. At the end of it, mercy. God searches for the sinner not to punish him, but to clothe him in righteousness and redemption. And that is us in this house. today. So, where are you?